Hi, everybody. It's me. I'm Matt Hawes of The Happy Show and Comics Unlimited. I'll get it straight. That's located inside of the Big E Superstore at 1540 Van Avenue in Evansville, Indiana. Open the first and third weekends of every month. Open the first Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of the month, and the third Saturday and Sunday of the month. So if you're ever in the area, come check me out. And check the whole place out. And there's the Big E2 next door, which is open every weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Also give them a look. Anyway, let's go on to the subject matter of this video. I was going to make my next video a continuation of me going through some of my paperwork for my shop and stuff that I had retained through the years pertaining to to the shop just in general, but like with my dealings with the distributors and such. But I'm going to go ahead and pause for the moment on that one, because I thought, while it's still a fresh topic, not that it's necessarily one that's going to be stale anytime in the near future, but I want to discuss what's happened just at the beginning of this year, this being 2024 at the time I'm filming this, and this still being within the first week of January. We're technically going into the second week. So what happened around this time is that Walt Disney lost the copyright. I almost said trademark, not the same. They lost, and that's a point I'm going to get to. They lost the copyright to Steamboat Willie, the 1928 cartoon film that introduced Mickey Mouse to the general public. There's debate, or I don't know if there's debate or whatever, but there's Plain Crazy was done first, but we're not going to get into that talk or the debate about which one is considered the first or whatever. Let's just say the whole idea, the whole concept of the 1928 Mickey Mouse is now supposed to be in public domain. Is in public domain. I don't think there's a question now. Even though Disney did its darndest to fight for decades to keep it from falling into public domain. Which I read an article that had somebody talking about the matter, and he said something that I thought was kind of a good point, and I had considered it before, but it was nice to see it spelled out there again, is that Disney itself, by and large, outside of perhaps Mickey Mouse and a few other characters here or there, has largely profited by taking public domain materials and trying to make it its own. It's trademarked those images and those characters. Snow White was not the creation of Walt Disney or anybody in his company. Nobody alive, even in the 1930s, created Snow White. That's a story that goes back way further than that. That was a public domain story. It was a folk tale or a fairy tale, that was passed on through the ages and such. Was a Brothers Grimm. I mean, was that right? Excuse me if I'm off on this one. I mean, it was written. We know who wrote it or whatever. But Snow White. If I'm wrong, please correct me. I can't remember right now if it was the Brothers Grimm or who it was. But Snow White was a fairy tale that was written, but unquestionably long before the 1938 film. And the same with Cinderella, obviously, another fairy tale. They took a lot of stuff from fairy tales. Peter Pan was by J.M. Barrie, and that was not by the Walt Disney Company. Mary Poppins was not Walt Disney's creation, but she wasn't public domain either. So I'm getting a little strayed off here. That was actually licensed. But my point is, not everything through the Walt Disney Company is a Walt Disney creation, and a good deal of what a lot of Pinocchio, there's another example, was public domain by the time that they did their versions. Some licensed, some public domain, but they got a lot out of it, and it continues to this day. The story of Mulan, I think, is one of those stories. Tarzan, I'm trying to think if it was public domain when they made their cartoon, but it is now, at least the earliest stories are. Again, that's another matter where a corporation of sorts, because the creator is no longer alive, Edgar Rice Burroughs' company still maintains a trademark, as I understand it, similar to what's going on with Walt Disney, but they do not have ownership of the original story, the original pulp stories anymore. Those are public domain. I'm belaboring my point here. So what I'm getting at is that they benefited. Disney, the Walt Disney Company, has benefited from retooling public domain stories and fashioning them, and then trademarking their versions and such, so that those are still around to this day. And a lot of people may not realize you can do your own Snow White, you can do your own this or that. And there has been other companies that have done Snow White type stories or adaptations, but you don't see it very often because a lot of people think of it as just a Disney property. It was not a Disney property inherently. So it's interesting when you talk about copyrights on it, because there is a lot of discussion what is or what isn't allowed with Steamboat Willie. I'm still kind of confused on the matter, even myself, even though I have a pretty good understanding of copyright and trademark laws as it pertains to certain properties like that, because I've been pretty well versed knowing the whole deal that happened with DC Comics and Fawcett Comics over the Captain Marvel property, the original Captain Marvel, not the Captain Marvel that we see in the films by Marvel's Cinematic Universe, by the Marvel Disney Company, coincidentally, or by the Captain Marvel the comic books with Marvel, the male version or whatever, but the original Shazam Captain Marvel, because Shazam, his real name, was Captain Marvel. For those who don't know, because you only might know him through the movies or what have you. So there's a thing that went on with that, but even that's not entirely. How am I trying to say this? It never fell into public domain yet. There's another interesting thing I actually just thought of as I'm saying this. 1939 is the year that they right, the year that they created. I just thought of something else. No, 39. Okay, yeah. So 38 Superman was 38 and Captain Marvel was 39. That I knew. I just thought about the fact that Superman's also on line here, but in a decade or so, they're coming up to being public domain. Let me rephrase that again. See, this all has so many nuances. Their first stories, their first, and that's where all this gets kind of confusing. I get, like I said, with the Captain Marvel DC thing, I get what's going on here, because again, we're not talking about public domain property, so it's a matter more just license and trademark. Whereas the part that I'm trying to understand with the Walt Disney deal with Steamboat Willie is exactly what is public domain. I understand pretty much, and I've talked with people about that. And then as I was talking, I did start to think, well, some of this I'm relating to that Captain Marvel DC situation. So if you'll stick with me, and if you're already stuck with me this long, I expect you probably will stick a little bit longer. I'll go over a brief as I can, history of what the deal was with the Captain Marvel and Superman thing, and how it relates to the Walt Disney thing. So, in the 1940s, I think it was first in the 40s that DC took Fawcett Comics to court over Captain Marvel, the original Captain Marvel, who says Shazam. Like I said, they were both created in the 30s, but I believe the first lawsuit was actually in the 40s, early 40s, because DC was claiming, DC's parent company then, it was National Comics and so on and so forth. We won't go into a whole history about that. But National Comics, DC, took Fawcett Comics to court saying that Captain Marvel was too similar to Superman and therefore was infringing on their trademark and copyright. At this point, there are a lot of superheroes. Superman was the first superhero as we know it in the modern sense. Or in the sense, what I mean is, we can debate, was the Phantom who came first? Was he considered a superhero because he doesn't have superpowers, but neither does Batman, blah, blah, blah. Again, lots of nuances whenever we really want to parse things out, but for simplification, Superman is generally regarded, certainly in the comic book format, as the first superhero, and he definitely was the pioneer of a new age of fiction, of comic books and all that. So, and he basically Superman through Superman with the Age of Superheroes gave comic books its own identity in a sense, because even though Phantom was created and Zorro and all that, the real thought of what a superhero is really took hold with Superman. And he was so popular, so many other companies did emulate him and had various characters that had similarities to Superman. Certainly, they did as far as being superpowered beings who fought crime in an otherwise normal world. So, Captain Marvel was pretty darn close, but at the same time, there's certain things that DC was alleging, like say they're villains, saying they both have bald science, mad scientist type villains. Luthor was originally a criminal mastermind, but really more of a mad genius, a mad scientist than he was a business, a business, what's what I'm looking for, criminal, whatever. Um, so, so that's an interesting point, except for when Luthor was first introduced, he was redheaded. He was still a mad scientist, but he was redheaded and looked nothing like really what he would eventually be evolve into. Whereas Sinestro, uh, I'm going blank, not Sinestro, Savannah, Dr. Savannah. I'm glad I thought about it because it's only something I've known forever. Brain fart, as they say. Dr. Savannah predates, the look of him predates Luthor. He was bald and everything before Luthor was. Now we could argue about another character. Get nuance all this crap about Ultra Humanite, another character, but we're not going to do that. Simply say it wasn't cut and dried necessarily that Fawcett was flat out stealing from Superman, but I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, let me put any more than any other character pretty much because yes, I mean if there wouldn't have been a Captain Marvel had there not been a Superman, but you could say that of all the other superheroes that followed. Um, so anyway, DC doggedly went after Fawcett through the next decade, or through that decade, or into the next decade. As I recall, they never fully won and got the company to stop publishing just because they won. Like they made them stop, but the company Fawcett decided to stop in part because of there was what's the point after a certain point the comic market after the 50s and into the 50s started to experience a slump, and I guess they just realized it wasn't worth being dogged after by DC. Also, that didn't help. But as I understand it, and again, it's been a while since I've read up, so if somebody does know about this, you can correct me. But I don't recall that Fawcett actually ever lost their lawsuit again, or the lawsuit battle with them between DC. It's just simply they just went and threw in the towel and said screw it, you know. So that left a period where the trademark was up for grabs. Now, a trademark, you can't copyright a name. You can copyright an image, but you can't copyright a name. But you can trademark a name. And so the trademark for the name Captain Marvel came up to grabs. Trademarks aren't, they don't have term limits in the same way that copyright does. Copyright is good for how X amount of years. It keeps, changing. And last I heard was 75 years of the life of the creator, if it's a personal creator and such. And then longer, because of Disney, there's longer deals with the corporations. Apparently, what is it? What it's been like 90 whatever years it was. But trademarks are use it, you lose it. But if you use it, you can, the way I understand, use it pretty much indefinitely as long as you keep paying on the trademarks or whatever. But if you don't use it, it goes back out to the floor. It's supposed to avoid marketplace confusion. The whole purpose of the trademark. It's distinct from copyright, the purpose of a copyright. But they go hand in hand together, and especially when we're talking in the commercial sense. So, Fawcett stopped publishing, so that meant the trademark was not being used by them, which meant that the trademark for the name Captain Marvel came up for grabs in the 1960s. And I always forget the name of the company, no matter how many years I've known and studied this stuff. And getting older don't help on this. But MLF or whatever company it was it Milton Fast was his name or whatever, his company did a lot of knockoff kind of versions of characters. They did their own Captain Marvel. Now, their Captain Marvel, when I say knockoff, was definitely nowhere near what the original Captain Marvel was. Certainly not as much as the original Captain Marvel was the Superman in terms of what he was like. But he was called Captain Marvel. They took the name Captain Marvel and applied it to this superhero who could say the word split, and then his body parts just went flying. Weird concept, kind of a fun, goofy idea, but strange. But they called that character Captain Marvel. And they definitely wouldn't have to worry about a lawsuit about the character himself being too close to the actual Captain Marvel, other than being a superhero with special abilities. He was definitely different. But they got the trademark. Now, that was in 66, I think. 66, roughly, in that area. I don't know when they actually retained the copyright, but I'm pretty sure the first issue was 1966. Obviously not 2066, we're not there yet. So anyway, then by 68, that company had folded, as if I recall correctly, and they definitely weren't using the name Captain Marvel anymore. I think because they folded and they weren't using the name, and it was up for grabs again, nobody was grabbing that trademark until 1968, when Marvel Comics grabs the trademark. Now, again, keep in mind, you can't copyright a name. So another book could have a character named Captain Marvel. They could both be published concurrently, and they were, as we'll get to. But you can't have a book called Captain Marvel. And you may also, depending on what the owners of that trademark decide to do, may not be able to put a character named Captain Marvel in other forms of entertainment without getting their permission at that point, because they are the ones who own the trademark. Not sure on exactly how that applies across the different mediums of entertainment, but I think there's something where it's a little tricky. Like if you want to make a movie or TV show of Captain Marvel, the person who owns the trademark in the comic book industry, like Marvel, for instance, might be able to stop that. And apparently that is the case. Again, avoid marketplace confusion, even though it's a different format. That can be done. That's not always entirely done. There are times where movies and TV shows share the same name as something like say, Phoenix can be used, and there could be a movie called Phoenix and a comic book called Phoenix. And because one's a movie and one's a comic book, there ain't marketplace confusion. Now, I'm just sitting here again, just thinking, but maybe the reason why this might not work whenever it comes to a cartoon or a movie based off of a superhero, or meant to be like a superhero, but using the name Captain Marvel, is because even though if it's a movie called Captain Marvel and the comic book is called Captain Marvel, since they're both superheroes and all that, maybe there could be conflict with trademark, which is why you can't do that. I'm sitting here trying to think about the distinctions here on that. But you definitely can't have another comic book and perhaps another periodical magazine or book called that name, because definitely that format is too similar to the other, or is identical to the other, I guess the case may be. So anyway, Captain Marvel, the trademark was taken by Marvel and applied to a character that they call Marvel, is his real name. And Marvel, he was from the Kree, which was an alien race. And if you watch the Marvel movies, you've been inducted into this whole deal, where you'll know probably what the Kree is. And certainly if you're a comic book fan who's followed Marvel for any length of time, you're aware who they are. So Marvel, who in the film version that came out of Marvel's version of Captain Marvel, was a woman in that one. I think it was Anne, or whatever. I don't know. I don't care. I can't remember her name. Warren Beatty's wife. But she played Marvel in the movie, but Marvel was a man in the books. And Marvel introduced him in 1968, and that's where they used the trademark. In a bit of ironic kind of situation. Yeah, I'm sure I'm using the word irony correctly here, unlike with Alanis Morissette's song. DC, who went doggedly after Fawcett all those years and kept after him so much so that Fawcett stopped publishing their Captain Marvel, licensed that Captain Marvel from Fawcett in the 70s, or very early 70s. But while they had gotten the chance to publish the original Captain Marvel, they could not title the book Captain Marvel. Now, they did reference the character by name on the cover of the first appearance, saying Shazam, the original Captain Marvel, or something along those lines. And that eventually dropped that part of it, maybe because of the trademark, maybe a trademark dispute, maybe, I don't know for sure on that, or maybe they just simply just dropped it because. But the book itself was called Shazam. There was also Saturday morning live action show aimed towards a youth audience that was also called Shazam, because again the trademark was, they no longer, the original Captain Marvel character have a thing named after him because of the trademark was Marvel Comics. So people roughly my age and younger, most of us grew up thinking the character's name was Shazam, the original Captain Marvel, when actually that's just the magic word he said that was the name of the wizard who gave him his abilities. Now in the modern comics, and the very latest comics for since 2014 or something like that, the character, and also in the film version that's come out in the recent years, the character that would be the original Captain Marvel is now officially called Shazam himself as well. And but that wasn't the case for about 50 years in the comics, which is, again, gets into this whole deal of copyright and trademark, where the copyright, you can't copyright names, so they called him Captain Marvel in the book, and there wasn't really an issue there. But like I said, they couldn't call them that, and Marvel would continue to hold on to the trademark. I don't know what the period is that you have to use the name. Marvel did have gaps in the publication and publishing history where they didn't have a Captain Marvel comic book out, but they would either feature him as a guest star or once he died. So really, they featured they created a new character called by Monica Rambeau, as I say her name, who's she became the new Captain Marvel in the early 80s, throughout the 80s basically. In the early 90s, they introduced Genis, if I remember correctly, that's his name. I'm trying to keep everything straight here. Who became another new Captain Marvel, and then later Carol Danvers, who was Ms. Marvel, became Captain Marvel. It was all mostly also so Marvel could keep the trademark on the name. In fact, there was a couple specials with the Monica Rambeau character in the 1980s and I think the very early 90s. That the only reason those books were really released isn't that the character was so popular and hot that fans demanded it, but Marvel didn't want to lose that trademark, so they put those books out to keep the trademark. And Marvel's never given up that trademark, and now that Carol Danvers is officially the name and they have the movies and stuff, that's not going to be the case. And DC must have realized after nearly 50 years that Marvel's not giving up that trademark, and that's when, like I said, around 2014, they even changed the original Captain Marvel's name to Shazam so that it mirrored the wizard, I guess, in the sense of passing on the torch. She took the name or whatever explanation that was said in the story. So, okay, so for all that, so there's that interesting part about where somebody loses the trademark to their name. Now, Mickey Mouse, see, that's a long road to get to here, but we're back to Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse, on the other hand, has not lost the trademark. He's lost the copyright, or he didn't lose the company's lost the copyright to the Steamboat Willie cartoon, and therefore as I understand it, now this is where things get a little tricky, the design of Captain Marvel, listen, of Mickey Mouse back in those days, the original, basically Mach 1's Mickey Mouse, that image, as I understand it, is public domain, not just the cartoon. This is also where I got confused on matter, because it also had to do with the Superman cartoon. And really, I was more confused about the Superman cartoon. Now that I think about it, it's been a long day. Now that I think about more than really the whole Captain Marvel, how it relates to Captain Marvel situation. Because the Superman cartoons from the 1940s, the early 40s, those Superman cartoons by Max Fleischer Company are in the public domain. They've been in the public domain for many years. Again, the trademark, though, DC Comics retains the trademark to Superman. So you can't use the Superman logo and this and that. But, excuse me, if you have a video company and you have a not a new remastered print from like uh, Warner Brothers or what have you, but an old actual print that was not not touched or redone by somebody, that print is in the public domain, and you can release your own copies of that cartoon. But on your box art, you better not put the Superman official Superman logo or the official the emblem or the text logo, because they'll sue your ass, because that is still trademarked. And you better not use a modern image of Superman and stuff. Now, there have been fly-by-night video companies that have skirted that issue and seemingly got away with it. I'm not sure if they got hit with lawsuits, but you're not technically allowed to do that, and they can and probably would sue you or go after you if you did, or at the very least, you would be sent a cease and desist letter about it. But I had wondered because of that, because I knew, well, you can't use the Superman image, though, other than the cartoon. If you're marketing if you have that print of that 1940s cartoon and you put it on your own DVD and market it, you're going to use the image from like a frame of that cartoon to sell your product, what have you. But basically, Superman otherwise his image is not public domain. So that I was confused about that whenever this first happened with Mickey Mouse, because I was trying to think, okay, so does that would mean that other than the image as it exists in the cartoon, could you use it beyond the cartoon? And I was hearing it like you could, because I thought you could only use a frame or a frame from the cartoon. Then the realization came to me that the Superman image can't be used other than a frame from the cartoon when marketing that public domain thing, because the Superman himself as a character is not public domain. It's just exactly that cartoon from Max Fleischer that's public domain. Whereas Mickey Mouse, I guess the distinction here is that Mickey Mouse, in a sense, that very first version is public domain, just like what happened with Sherlock Holmes and Tarzan and such. The first description, the first images, designs, whatever, that version is in the public domain, as I understand it. So I guess that means you could arguably, if I heard correctly, you can use Mickey Mouse on a shirt then, right? But that version, only that version. But I do know that you probably don't want to put the Mickey Mouse logo, the lettering logo. Don't try that. Don't try the distinctive mouse circle with the circle ears or whatever as a symbol. You best might not want to do any text at all, but certainly don't say it like that or make it look anywhere near like that, because Disney still does retain that trademark. And again, they're trying to avoid marketplace confusion, blah, blah, blah. Now, I do, as I understand it, think you could use that version of Mickey Mouse, say, in a comic book or cartoon of your own, which is really interesting, but you still gotta be careful how you do that. We'll figure out with Superman how much this really applies to Superman in the year 2038. But roughly about 10, not 10 years, more than 10 years, right? Or whenever it is. No, it wouldn't be 20. It'd be sooner than 2038, because that'd be 100 years, and this is less than 100. Anyway, we'll find out fairly soon. Try to keep everything straight here. No, that's right. Anyway, like I said, I'm trying to keep everything straight. It won't be 100. And when I say 100 years, I mean 100 years from the time the thing was created till. Anyway, I realized, wait a minute, no, the cartoon, this is cartoon, it's 90 whatever years. I can't keep straight because Disney kept fighting for so many years. It was 92 years? Anyway, my point is that Superman himself, his original story, is not in the public domain, but the Max Fleischer cartoons are. But that's distinct from how Mickey Mouse is in the public domain. Though Steamboat Willie itself is also, the cartoon is in the public domain. Mickey Mouse's conceptual design, or not even conceptual, it was actually, but his very first design is also in the public domain, though Superman's very first design is not. Does that sound clear? It's complicated. It's so anyway. And if you do understand things legally better than I do, because I'm not a legal expert, I have a pretty good understanding on the whole deal with the Captain Marvel trademark deal with Superman, and I have a pretty good understanding of the Max Fleischer deal with that cartoon. I have, admittedly, a little bit less comprehension, I think, on just exactly what elements can be used with Steamboat Willies in that version of Mickey Mouse. I'm clear on the fact you can't use the Mickey Mouse logo. I'm clear on a lot of things in the modern version of Mickey Mouse or any version after 1928 that was revised, that sort of stuff. I'm clear on that. I'm just not clear on to the extent that you can use that version of Mickey Mouse outside of the Steamboat Willie cartoon and such. I do know, like the cartoon, you could release your own version of the unaltered print, just like you can with that Superman cartoons, those Superman cartoons. I get that, but as far as usage of that image of that version of the Mickey Mouse, that's what I'm curious about. And I know there's going to be a bunch of people that will debate or whatever, and I might have a copyright lawyer, and maybe have a noted copyright lawyer that sees this and maybe comment, but otherwise, a lot of us are just, I guess, playing junior copyright lawyers. And so I would suggest that anybody who thinks about doing it with Mickey Mouse, you do want to walk carefully there. I was going to say walk softly. Do that too. But you may want to walk carefully there because it could be a landmine if you don't know exactly how much leeway you have with that copyright. But anyway, what's your thoughts on the matter? I'm going to go ahead and end it there and just see if anybody who watches this wants to throw out their own comments and discussions and opinions and all that, and knowledge if you have any more to offer on that subject matter. Hopefully, I didn't come across too rambling, as I've said in the past. Few number of times I've made vlogs for the last couple of years, however long it's been. These vlogs are very much free form. I don't script them, so excuse me if it sounds like I'm going on. But I just want to get the thoughts out there, and I try to keep these things, let's see, what time is it? Like, within less than a half hour, or around a half hour. I always go a little bit over, but anyway, that's it for this video, and I'll try to be more short or whatever in the next video, which will probably be returning to going through those papers from my retailer days. Thanks, and I'll see you next time. Yay! Now I'm going to turn this off.